During the last few days, we built a program which accesses data from a REST API. Now that REST API was built by other people, but today you learn how to build your own REST API in Python. And what you're looking at is the actual API that we will build together. So this page is actually the documentation of the API that we will build. So the API has a home page, just like the news API had a home page where you could see the documentation, how to use the API. So what we've got here is some minimal documentation. It tells you what the format of the endpoint is. So that's the base URL up to here, and then you can provide a station and a date, and that will give you temperature data about that particular station. Now, down here, you'll see a list of stations, and that's about 6,500 of them. So that's a lot of stations, and these are stations across Europe. So for example, if you want the station Stockholm, that station has a station ID of 10. So if you want the weather for Stockholm for a particular date, you would access an endpoint like this. So station and date. You see the date is at the end. So 1988 is the year, 10 is the month, and 25 is the day. So 25th of October 1988. So if we click that URL, so that's the URL. With that endpoint, what you get is this JSON data. So we have this pair of data, so the date we requested, the station ID, and then we get a temperature, which is what the user wants. So the temperature for that day, the average temperature for that day was minus 0.9 Celsius degree. Similarly, you can enter here any station number. So let's change the URL to something else. For example, from 10 we make it 14, the same date, and you see that the temperature for that date was 11. So station number 14 was Salzburg in Austria. So those are weather observation stations, and that's the API. So there's a lot of data that I'll give you, and you'll use this data to serve them through your API. So there's a lot of fun stuff to learn and extremely useful. So let's keep going, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey, welcome back. As part of today's programming concept, you will learn how to program in HTML. HTML is a language, that's for sure. HTML is the language which builds every web page on the web. And HTML is interpreted by your browser. So basically every page that you see, if you right-click over that page and go to View Page Source, that is actually HTML, and your browser is interpreting this language and displaying the output, which is this page. Now, why am I teaching you HTML? Well, because I showed you earlier this page, right? So that's the homepage of our API, which gives some information here. So this is also built in HTML. Now, I want to clarify something though. When you use a library such as Streamlit, you don't need to know HTML. So as you have seen before, for Streamlit, we simply wrote some Python code such as st.write, and then we enter some text here, and that would translate to something on the browser. The secret here is that Streamlit produces HTML for us, so we don't need to write HTML. So if you click over the pages we have produced with Streamlit, if you right click and go to Views Page Source, again you'll see HTML code. So that HTML code is also produced by Streamlit. But there are other libraries such as Flask and Django. These libraries are also used to build websites, just like Streamlit is used to build websites. But Flask and Django don't produce that HTML. Now you'd ask, well, why not using Streamlit for everything then? Well, that would not be a good idea for more complex apps because you can't just make any app with Streamlit. So Streamlit is limited to more simple websites and more simple apps. If you want to build an API, for example, you can't do that with Streamlit. You need something like Flask or Django. And Flask is what we're going to use today. So before we jump into Flask, I want to introduce you to HTML. Therefore, let me delete that. Therefore, we want to create an HTML file here. So right click, go to new and create an HTML file, give it a name. Let's say tutorial. You don't need to give the HTML extension because PyCharm will give the extension automatically. So if you created that HTML like I did, you should see some code already. So PyCharm added some code. Another way to create the HTML file would be to right click and go to new and go to a simple file, and then you'd say tutorial2.html for example, but then you'd need to write that code manually in here. So every HTML page, every HTML document needs to have that code. So I'll delete the tutorial2.html and keep tutorial.html. Now, so this is an HTML document and you can open it by right clicking and go to open in browser and open with one of your browsers, or you can just click this one of these icons here if they show on your PyCharm. So like you can click on Chrome, and for now this is an empty web page, but we can add content. To add content to a web page, you need to do that inside these body tags. So all these are called tags. This is a head tag, this is an HTML tag, this is a body tag. The actual content, the visible content, is added inside the body tags. I'll explain what these tags are also, but let's add some content first. For example, hello here. You don't need to save the page, just go to that button again and hello is rendered in here. So there we have a simple web page with some content. Let me zoom that in. So there we go. Let's add some more content. Now, it's a good idea to actually use proper tags for each element, for each content that you add. So I added this tag. It's a p tag. It means a paragraph. A paragraph tag is used to add normal text, like hello, this is our first web page. So now if you go to the web page, you can refresh, or in my case, this refreshes automatically. Otherwise, you need to press Ctrl R or Command R to refresh the page if the automatic refresh is not working. So that's the paragraph we just added. Now, it's a good idea to actually indent this with a tab like that, because what we're looking here is now like a hierarchy of tags. So the first tag is this doc type HTML. This is like the declaration of what this type of document is. And then we have the HTML tag. Now, if I select this tag, you'll see that this will be highlighted, this closing HTML tag. So every tag has an opening tag. So it opens in here and it closes in here. And everything inside is part of that tag. And then we have the head tag. It opens here and it closes in here. And everything inside those two tags is part of the head tags, right? These are part of the two head tags. Now, these are some declarations of the title of the web page and the character set of the web page. So if we change this to, let's say, my web page, and you go to the web page, you'll see here on the tab on the browser, my web page is shown. So that's the title of the web page. And then we have the body tags. So now everything that we enter here is part of the actual web page. So let me show you some more tags. we have the h1 tag, welcome, and that will render as big font in here. You also have smaller headings, so these are headings like this is our web page, and that will render like this. And then we have the p tags, so normal text. Now next, let's add an image. To add an image you need the img tag, but then before you close the tag you want to add an src property, which is equal to this quotes, and inside the quotes you need to enter the path to the image you want to display, cat.png. Now this image has to be in the same directory with tutorial.html. So I'll paste the image here, which I copied before. You can find this image attached in the lecture resources, or you can use your own images. So cat.png, cat.png. Then you want to close this tag, and that's it. Now image is one of those tags that doesn't need this closing tag, so you need to remove that. It doesn't need that tag because, so that's the content, so it doesn't need a closing tag because we're not showing any text. So usually between the tags we show some information, but since the image path is given through this property, then we don't have any other information to show besides the image. Now this cat is quite big, as you can see, so for that we can add styling to the image using a style property, and that would be equal to quotes, and inside quotes you give the properties such as width, let's say 500 pixels, px, and then you do this semicolon and then height, so we're still inside these quotes. The height, let's say 400 px, so don't forget the px, and let's check the cat. So I can see that the ratio, the aspect ratio of the image has changed. So if you want to preserve the aspect ratio, then you need to only give one of these properties, so only the width, and the aspect ratio will adjust, so the height will be relative to the width. So that's what we have so far. Let me show you now how to add a link. A link can be added using the a tag with an href property, and there you give like https google.com. So that's a link, and then you close the link, and this has a closing a tag, and inside here you give the description of the link, the text of the link, such as Google page, and it will be rendered like this. So if you click that, it will take us to Google. And the problem here is that this was rendered in the same page with the image. But you can fix that by using a break tag, like that. So this creates a break line. As you see now, there's a break line after the image, so between the image and the link. You can add more break lines if you want more space between the two elements, just like that. Okay, so we need to add one more element to this code, and then we're done. What I want to add is something here on top. What I want to add is a nav element, and this will contain multiple other elements, nested elements, which will be like this tags. I'll just copy these actually. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. I'll change the links to about, this to contact us, and the last one store or something like that. So let me change the descriptions as well. I'll explain what I'm doing in just a bit. Contact us and store. So if I go to the web page now, we will see that what I've just added is the actual navigation menu of the website. So that's how you can add the navigation menu. The problem here is that if we click over one of these, the page is not found. So you see that the browser is trying to access the page contact us. The page is not found because this is just one HTML page. And now we're stepping into the world of interactions. And to do such interactions, to enable such interactions, you need a web framework such as Django or Flask. So these are web frameworks written in Python, and these enable you to create complete websites with multiple pages so that the pages can interact with each other. And so for that you need web frameworks. You need a language such as Python or PHP. So PHP also has its own frameworks, and Python has its own frameworks such as Flask and Django. And we will use, of course, Python. And exactly how we use Python, that's a question which you'll understand in the next videos. So get ready for that and see you later. Thanks. In the previous video, we created a website. Actually, this is not a website, it's just a web page. Now we're going to create a website which has multiple pages. And to create a website, you need a web framework. And we're going to use the Flask web framework for that. So Flask is a Python library. That means you need to install it. So make sure you have created a PyCharm project, and there I have the main.py file, which is currently empty. And I have this tutorial.html file, which I'm going to use. You can find this attached in the lecture resources if you don't have it. And you'll also find this cat.png file, which is needed by this HTML document. So let's go to main and import Flask. Actually, we only need the Flask class from the Flask library. So install package Flask. The package is being installed, so the web framework is being installed. So this web framework is what's going to manage multiple HTML pages. So you can think of a web framework as a manager of multiple pages, and it's responsible that these pages interact with each other correctly. So Flask was installed successfully on my computer. And the first thing we want to do now is we want to create a website object. So this Flask here is a class, and this class creates website object instances, or you can also say Flask object instances, but think of it as a website object. So just like we have strings to represent text, we have numbers to represent numbers, lists to represent series of objects. We also have website objects to represent websites. So let's create a variable and say Flask, so that class, and give a name to this. It can be anything, we'll change it later, but for now let's say website, whatever it is. So with that we have a website object. Now we need to connect HTML pages with this website object. To do that, we refer to the app variable, this variable, using this special symbol, the @ symbol. I'll explain in just a bit why we use that symbol. And so you refer to that and then to the root method of that app object. And inside here, in quotes, you give a path, let's say home. So you know that whenever you go to a website and you click on different links, those links take you to a particular path to that website, particular URL in that website. So each page has a particular URL. So this HTML that we'll connect now will have this URL. And the HTML will be inside this function that we need to define in here. Let's call this function home. You can call it whatever you like. And this will return this HTML document. And so that HTML document will be rendered whenever the users visit your website URL /home. So for that we need to return, but you cannot return tutorial.html directly like that. You need to return it through a function which you need to import first. The function is called render template. And then you go here and then you say render template tutorial.html. But tutorial.html has to be inside a specific folder in the root directory. That folder should be named templates with lowercase letters and ending with s, so not template but template. So you see my folder is here, it's in the same directory with main.py, so that's the root directory, and inside template you want to drag tutorial.html. So make sure that tutorial is there, so tutorial.html, and here you say tutorial.html. So Flask will look for HTML documents inside that templates folder by default. So Flask is configured to look for a templates folder in your root directory. And lastly, we need to say here app.run and give an argument for the debug. So the debug argument should be true, and this will allow you to see errors on the web page. If there are errors, so you want to see them to understand what's going on. Make some space here, and yeah, let's run this. To run this app, you can just right click and go to run main. And that's the URL of the app, so click that. And we see this not found page because we haven't created such a URL yet, so that would be the home page. If you delete home from there and save the script, go here, refresh the page, then you should see this view. Otherwise, if you wanted to have home here, then you should type in home here, right? And then you go to this page. So now it's rendering fine because the URL, so this URL is connected to that HTML document. So in other words, what's happening is that when the user visits that URL, this function is called. So that root is connected to this function, and the decorator makes it possible. So this @ symbol here means that this line is a decorator and it decorates this function. So basically it connects that method to this function, so that when this is visited on the browser, this is called and tutorial.html is rendered. That's the idea. Now, if you want more pages, you can duplicate this function and here write something else such as about, and then here say something like about.html, create an about.html file, about. So there we go, about.html. Maybe write something here in the body tag, hello, I am the about page. Go to main.py, make sure everything looks fine. Oh, you need to change the home function to something else like about. Then save the script, go to the browser and change the URL to about. And you'll get that page, as you can see here. Hello, I am the about page. Then, next, what you can do is you can go to tutorial.html and you can go to the nav element and make sure that you have the URL of the about in here. So, about here, about here. That means when you click that about menu item from here, that should take you to the about page, but you need to add one more slash here in the root. So let's refresh. Yeah, there we go. So again, what we just did, let me wrap it up. What we just did is that we have this app with 2 pages, 2 URLs, 2 pages. The first URL is the domain name, which in our case, since it is local, the domain name is 127.0.0.1.500. So domain name /home gives us that page. And this page renders tutorial.html, and this tutorial.html has this content and this menu bar in here, and the about link points to the about page. It's a page of our website. And so when the user clicks that link, this is visited, and when that is visited, this function is called, and that function renders the about.html document. So that's the idea. That's how you create multiple page websites, and you can do that with Flask, as you just saw. Now, we have an issue here with the image, so the image is not being displayed. To display images, you need to create another folder in the root directory and call it static. And inside static, you put the images. So I'll drag this cat.png image to static. And you also need to do something else besides putting the image there. You need to go to tutorial.html, locate the image, the img tag, which is in here, and you need to change this. So this is dynamic now, and you need to give this syntax. So double underscores, and you say URL for static in single quotes, and then a comma, and then in single quotes cat.png. So you need to declare the folder where cat is, and be careful here. All this, the parentheses, the curly parentheses should go inside double quotes. So please double check this. We have this bracket here which closes in here, and then src has this enclosed in quotes, and then we have URL for static enclosed in single quotes, cat.png in single quotes, and these should be double quotes, and these two need to be in parentheses. So basically this is like a method. It's like a Python method with two arguments, static and cat.png. So static is a string, cat.png is a string. So this method is inside double curly brackets, and the curly brackets are inside double quotes. So let's go back to the website. So we need to go to one of the valid URLs. We have home or about. So that's /home. So that's one of the errors you might get on the web page. So this says that URL 4 takes 2 positional arguments, but 3 were given. So let's check it. We need to go to tutorial.html. And I know that the problem here is that you need to give this argument name. So with that, let's go and refresh. And finally, that's the image. The cat is very angry because we had lots of errors, obviously, but that's fine. Yeah, that's the final code for this app. So that's what a web framework does. You have a Python file, and the Python file is managing multiple HTML pages, and it's defining when these HTML pages should be displayed on the website through these root methods. Yeah, thanks for following. We will continue with Flask because we need to build an API with Flask. So in the next videos, we need to build the web page of our API where we show the documentation of our API. So see you there. Hey, welcome back. In this video, we will construct the API documentation page and the API page itself where the users can get JSON data. Let's begin. So far we worked on some examples which were not related to our app, so I just wanted to introduce you to Flask. Now we have two pages here. One points to our domain/home page and the other points to our domain/about page. So what I want to do now is first I want to move these HTML pages out of the templates folder, because in templates now I'll insert another home.html page. So tutorial and about were not related to our project, so I removed them from templates. Now in home.html, I'm going to write some documentation about the API. And in main.py, in here, I'm removing that home name so that when the users visit the domain homepage without entering any subdirectory, they can go to this home.html page. So let's try that. Let's put some hello string here and go to main, and this should go and be changed to home.html, so it points to that home.html file, and run main.py. So if you click over the domain, that should take you to the home page. So we see the string hello, so home.html has been displayed here on the home page. Then in the home page, we want to put some basic information such as an h1 tag, weather data API, so this should be something about our API. If I refresh the page, should display in here. So let me put this on the right, this on the left, so we see what's going on. And the title should also be probably the same, weather data API. So this is the title of this particular web page. Next, we should think about what URL format are we going to have. So in this paragraph here, we can tell the users, the visitors, the type of URL they can enter. Later on, when we deploy this app on a host, on a server, we're going to get a domain such as example.com or mypythonapi.com. But for now, our domain name is this locally. So we want to tell the user something like, I'm copying this HTTP URL. So we want to tell the user that the URL format will be something like this, /API v1. So you can write whatever you like here, right? You can write APPI or APPIS, whatever you like. So, but it makes sense to write something meaningful. And so after the slash, I'm writing v1 to basically tell users that this is version 1. Of course, you don't have to write this, you can leave it like that. You can also leave it like that and then continue here with the parameters such as station and date. But this is a good idea to have API v1, and then you write the parameters station and date. Now, this part, the station and the date, will be dynamically entered by the user. So if you still don't understand what I'm doing, let me write a new paragraph. URL example. So here you'll understand what I'm talking about. So basically that's a format, that's a formula, so to say, and this would be an example. Let's say station with the code 10 and date 1988 10 25th. So 25th of October 1988, we are asking for data for this station. So let me refresh the page here. Yeah, that's what the user is going to see. And then they can try this URL, for example, put it on the address bar, and that URL should give data for this particular station. Now, our main.py script should be able to handle this kind of URL. So currently, this script is only handling this URL, so the home page and the about page. Now, we don't need an about page, so let's change this about page to API v1. So API v1, so when the user visits API v1 slash station with this brackets, so less than, greater than, this is a special syntax of the URL pattern you place in Flask, and the same goes for date, like that. So these two denote that the users can enter values for these two. So any value that the user enters, let's suppose the user in the URL here enters, for example, this, they place it here, so they place 10 for station. Now that 10, that value 10, is going to be stored in the station argument here of this function, station and date, right? So date will go here and station will go in here. And then what we will do here, but we will do that tomorrow, but I can give you some clue now to help you understand what's going on. So in here, then we will do something like df is equal to pandas.read CSV, and we're going to read our data, which contain all the historical weather data, and we're going to get these data, and then we're going to get the temperature for a particular station, for that station, let's say station like that, for a particular date. So I'm going to show you the exact syntax, but for now I'm just trying for you to understand what's going on. So we're going to get the temperature, and then we're going to return the temperature here on the website, on the web page, when the user clicks that URL. So basically, let's suppose for now that we were able to extract the temperature of 23. So we are just supposing the temperature is 23. I'm hard coding this value. Of course, we will get it from the actual data, but for now, let's keep things simple. So once we have the temperature, then we can return the temperature directly like that. Let's give it a try. Save the main.py file, go here, enter that URL. If you get this error, it says that the return type must be a string, dict, list, tuple with headers, etc. But we returned an integer here. So you can simply convert this into a string, refresh the page, and that's what we get, 23. So when the users ask for a particular station and a particular date, we will calculate, we will find out what the temperature was at that particular date for that station and return it here. But a better idea would be to construct a dictionary here. So something like station, and tell the user what station they chose, and then date. So this is good to have. It's not necessary, but it's good to give the users a complete dictionary, also telling them what they chose, so they have a complete view of the data and the date as well. So station is this variable, date is that variable, and finally temperature, which is equal to the temperature value. So these are strings, right? These are variables, don't confuse them. And refresh, save first, refresh, and now we finally get some JSON data here. So that's the date, and that's the actual date that the user entered in the URL. So if I change this to 26, reload, we get 26. If I change the station to 20, we get 24, the station. Of course, the temperature will also be dynamically calculated for every load of the page, but for now it's just static. So now we have this data, and as you saw in the previous app where we accessed the news API data, you can build any app you can imagine to extract these data and then maybe show those data on a website or send them by email, construct some graphs with the temperature values of different days. You can do anything. So that was about the tutorials for today. We focused on Flask. Now, just before I close this video, I want to do a last change here for today in the app. So it's a good practice to not use website here as a name for the Flask app, but to use name. Name is a special variable. I want to demonstrate you what exactly name is. I'll create a file, a.py. You don't have to create these files, so I'll delete them. So if I print name here and I execute this a.py file, I'm going to get main as output. So this variable contains this string underscore underscore main underscore underscore. Now if I create a second b.py file and here I import a and then I execute b.py, we're going to get a as output. So what happens is that when I execute b, inside b we are importing a, but when a is imported, a is executed. That means print name is executed. So in this case, name had the value of a. So in other words, when this a script is imported from some other script, the value of the name variable will have the value of the name of the script. But when the script is executed directly, the value of name will be main. We can take advantage of this fact in here and say that if name is equal to main, then we want to run the Flask app. In other words, we only want to run this Flask app when this main.py script is executed directly. But if we are importing this script from some other scripts, let's say we want to import main from this script, in that case our purpose perhaps is to use some functions of the main script which we may define later on. So our purpose is not to run this app, right? If we import that app from somewhere, our purpose is just to use some elements of that app. So that's why we have this condition here. So we only run the websites when this script is executed directly and not when the script is imported from somewhere else. That's the entire purpose of this expression and that name variable. So this is a common practice. And yeah, that's it. Let's do some reformatting. So this needs 2 break lines here to be more readable according to the coding styles. And that's it. I'll delete the 2 A and B files. Then I will enable version control, VCS, enable version control, so that we can commit our first changes. So let's create a .gitignore file, add it to the repository, then and .idea will be excluded. Then we want to add to the repository the static folder, the templates folder, gitignore and main.py. About and tutorial.html were files where we did some trials and simple examples, so they are not related to the project, therefore I'll not add them to the tracking. So with that, right click, go to Git and add. So all these files are in green now and they are ready to be committed. So this is day 29 and this is the initial commit. So commit the changes and we're done with the videos, with the tutorials for today. Thanks a lot. Hey, in this video I want to give you some quick information regarding running multiple Flask apps. So in our case we were simply running one app, but it could happen that you might create a second app on a separate PyCharm project, and if you have this app running, this app is running on port 5000. That means you will not be able to run the other app because this port is occupied. So all the Flask apps run on port 5000 by default. But you can change that. So if you're running another app, you can specify the port argument here in the last line. So you can say port is equal to 5001. So give it a different port name from the default port, which is 5000. So if I close this, if I run this app again, you will see that this app will run on port 5001. So that will not clash with the other app which was running in port 5000. Note that if the apps are not running at the same time, it's not needed to specify that port. But just in case you run the apps at the same time and the second app will give you an error here, it will say that the port is occupied, then you should remember that you should specify another port here to fix that error. So that's what I wanted to tell you in this video. See you in the next one. In this video, I'll give you the task for today's exercise, and the task consists of creating a new app. And that will be an API, so you need to build an API as part of this exercise. Now, before I explain you the exact task for today, let me demonstrate you the API that you need to build. So this is how it works. This API returns the definition of English words. For example, when the user enters the domain /API/v1 and then they enter a word such as pillow, they get this dictionary. So the dictionary should return the definition of the word pillow in this case, and also the word itself. Let's try another word. Let's say sun. Again, we get the definition, so that's the key definition and the value. In this case, we have multiple values, but it's still the same string, so sun has multiple meanings. You have meaning 1 up to here, and then we have this \n, and then meaning 2 up to here. But it's still one string. And then again we have the word key and its value sun, which is the word that the user entered. So any word that the users enter here as part of the URL will be sent to your program, and your program will return its definition here. Now this site, if you visit the homepage, should also have a basic homepage, which could look like this. So basically you give the format to the users and an example of a URL request. So basically some simple documentation. So that's the final program that you will build, and you'll build it across 2 days, starting today and also tomorrow. So the task for today, your task is to create this homepage, and also when the users enters a word such as sun, for example, what you should return as part of the definition here is not the definition itself, but simply return the same word that the user entered here, but in capital letters. So your output should look something like this, just for today. So instead of the actual definition, just get the user's word and return its uppercase version like this. So that's just to take things step by step. So tomorrow I'll give you the actual data set, which has all the words and the definitions. So these are CSV data, and then you can simply implement the actual data to make the final app. But for today, 2 tasks, the homepage and this kind of output for the part of the API. Yeah, good luck with that. Hey, welcome back. This is my solution to the current task of building a simple API. So that's my main.py file. It takes care of 2 routes, the homepage routing and the URL pattern routing of the API. So the home page renders the home.html document, which is hosted in my templates folder, and it looks like this. And on the front end, it looks like this. So that's the home.html document, and when the user visits a URL to get the API response like that, I return this dictionary with the words capitalized. So any word that the user enters here is capitalized, and I did that using this API function. So the user's word goes in here, and then it goes in here, and from there goes here. And here it is uppercase, it's capitalized using the upper method, which capitalizes all the letters of a string. The result is saved in the definition variable, and then I serve the definition variable to this dictionary here. So I constructed the dictionary, and then I return the dictionary, and when the users visit this URL, that's what they see, that dictionary. And that's it. Then I serve this in this port 5001, and that's the complete code for this exercise. In the next day, we're going to serve the actual definition of any words, and for that we're going to use some data. So let's talk back tomorrow. See you.